So here's the scoop about making new indefensible videos nowadays. Pretty much all of them get copyright struck like immediately, and take about a week for me to work through the legal appeals and actually start getting ad revenue on them. Which means that even if a bunch of video game topics all drop at once, I try to only do one a week. Especially because YouTube still operates under the 3 strikes and you're out rule, even if those strikes are kind of bogus. Atomic Heart is kinda old news at this point. It came out about a month ago, and the controversy surrounding it is even older. But hey, we like to slowly graze through our video games over here, alright? I know that hyper-schizo zoomers will pop a bunch of Adderall laced with cocaine and zip through a game in one night, but I don't mind taking a few weeks to get through a title. Now that we've done our stream playthrough of the game though, it's time to dig in. As always, there's the review of the game itself, and then there's the controversy surrounding it. I tend to cover both of these topics in my videos, as my channel is at least partially political, and I do my best work when I straddle the line, like with my Forspoken video. If that doesn't suit you, you can click off right now, but if you're here to stay, let's talk about Atomic Hearts as a game. Well, every reviewer and their uncle have all pointed out just how much Atomic Hearts is like BioShock. Hell, even the developers have described it in relation to BioShock. BioShock is the 2007, Jesus, 2007, it's been that long? The 2007 AAA release that is basically considered legendary at this point. In that era of gaming, first-person shooters were mainly war games like Call of Duty. And well, BioShock came along and, in the style of System Shock, took the first-person play style and made it into a linear quasi-RPG horror game. This means that while there is certainly a lot of gunplay and action, the game also includes the option to be more stealthy, the ability to upgrade and customize weapons using materials that you find in the environment, as well as the plasmids, quasi-magic powers on a cooldown that are channeled with your offhand. Yes, I know they're not actually magic. You get them by injecting serums, but you're doing stuff like summoning insects and throwing lightning. They might as well just be magic. The point is, unlike a game that is entirely run and gun, the breadth of combat options available to you in BioShock means that you can choose, to an extent, how to approach each encounter. BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite both kept these mechanics, more or less, and Atomic Heart does the exact same thing, looting scrap to upgrade your guns or build new ones, along with what is this time a talking techno glove that channels your various powers. The weapon upgrades are unique enough to constitute new playstyles, with some of them being downright broken, while the powers are all basically what you expect: slow, shock, freeze. If you had just played BioShock, playing Atomic Heart right afterward would probably feel very samey, but to be honest, it was actually just fine. Games like this haven't been made in what, 8 years or so? Considering how shit a lot of other new games are nowadays, going back to a basic formula that works, even if you're retreading old ground, is a breath of fresh air. The vast majority of gameplay takes place in isolated rundown research facilities, and playing through these range from fun to tedious. Exploration is done well enough, but checkpoint location is pretty erratic. Sometimes you'll have vending machines and save rooms stacked on top of each other. Other times, you'll go for like an hour without finding one. The puzzles are okay, but tend to suffer from that common mishap of, you know what to do, you just don't know how the game wants you to do it. And that is the death knell for a good puzzle game. The best example of this is in the ruined train hub, where it's immediately made obvious that the game wants you to move a train car across various rails, rotate it on platforms, and use it to push an obstacle out of the way. The hard part is not figuring out what you have to do, but navigating the poorly designed platforming up to the various control panels while hoping you don't glitch through the floor. The combat is initially quite interesting, but the game suffers from having too few enemy types. The white humanoid robots are your basic baddie, and when they introduce a black variant with a laser face early on, you're thinking, oh okay, there's going to be a bunch of different humanoids with unique powers. Except, no, they never do this again. It's just white ones and the occasional black one for the rest of the game. You're also going to get real tired real quick dealing with those little green sawblade guys. And the plant-infected enemies are honestly really out of place. They look like someone at the development team discovered a cool-looking zombie model and decided to asset flip it into the game just because they had it. Unlike the BioShock games, Atomic Heart includes several open areas with constantly respawning robots, full of side objectives to explore, new blueprints to loot, and little bits of lore to enjoy. These weren't done so well, and feel like they're there simply to appeal to the popularity of open-world games nowadays. Moreover, the game doesn't make it fully clear when you're permanently leaving the open world for the game's final stretch. Here's what I mean. The final facility of the game is across this bridge full of enemies on the far side of the map, with tons of different kinds of robots, the plant guys come back, and 2 boss fights. And you can make the choice to either hop in a car and gun it down the highway, hoping not to crash, or fight your way through the gauntlet to gain extra skill points and loot. This feels like the point of no return, and sure enough, once you enter the facility at the end of the bridge, you can't go back up to the surface. But this actually isn't the point of no return. Even though you're outside and the bridge is part of the open world, once you're at this point, you already can't go back. As a player, once you notice the challenges ahead, your natural impulse might be to go back for any upgrades you might have missed, but you're already locked out of the rest of the game. The only thing you can do is grind for scrap on the small respawning robots at the start of the bridge. Like the BioShock games, the story of Atomic Hearts is thematically about the critique of a specific ideology. In BioShock, it was all about libertarianism. We can sympathize with Andrew Ryan's hyper-individualistic ideology and motivations, given his experience with the Bolsheviks and how, after moving to America, he was able to become rich through his own hard work and talents. But we can also see how his ideology ultimately destabilized and brought ruin to Rapture, the underwater libertarian Art Deco paradise he had built to escape the encroachment of the post-war American state. In BioShock Infinite, it's all about theocracy and scientific racism. We can see the exceptional technological advancement created by American society, obviously exaggerated in the flying city of Columbia. But we can also see the moral degradation inherent in believing that superior capabilities make you more than just exceptional at what you do, but an inherently superior race of people. For Atomic Heart, the ideology this time is communism. In this game, the Soviet Union is a paradise on Earth due to their creation of advanced robots and AI long before the capitalist West ever got that far, leading to a life of leisure for the Soviet population. The capitalist class was abolished, not only because of the socialist revolution, but because of both the exceptional innovative individual that drive economic progress, like Andrew Ryan, as well as the working class performing the grunt labor needed to implement those innovations, were both largely rendered obsolete by the free labor of robots. The Soviet people spend their time partying, or lazing around, or engaging in intellectual pursuits, but it's clear that the amount of physical human work needed to maintain the society is minimal. Meanwhile, the capitalist world on the other side of the globe is collapsing due to worker revolts in the face of exported Soviet robot labor, which was necessary due to a massive human worker shortage as a result of the Brown Plague, a Nazi bioengineered virus let loose at the end of the Second World War. The idea here is that Karl Marx believed that history worked in stages, and that the transition from feudalism to capitalism to socialism was inevitable, where in the real world, the Black Plague caused a massive labor shortage, shifting power to the serfs, and ushering in the social upheaval necessary for feudalism to die and capitalism to be born, at least in the Marxist view. In Atomic Heart, the Brown Plague did much the same. Labor shortage, social upheaval, transition to socialism. The utopian societies of all of these games fall apart due to the flaws of their ideologies, and it's no different in Atomic Heart. The Soviet Union launches Collective 1.0, a network that allows the robots to work interconnectedly, as a quasi-hive mind. They're also close to the launch of Collective 2.0, where humans can be brought into the hive mind through these little devices that you stick on your temple. The Soviet doctor behind all of these innovations, Comrade Sechenov, secretly included a bit where humans won't be allowed to leave the hive mind once they're plugged in, except for him, where the hive mind will be controlled by him, and where the humans will be brainwashed in the hive mind to follow his orders. If BioShock's critique of rugged libertarianism is that it leads to highly competent people neglecting those well off, and BioShock Infinite's critique of American exceptionalism is the same thing on a global scale, Atomic Heart's critique of communism is in the dangers of collectivization due to it requiring total power to be centered in the hands of flawed individuals. Now, the way this story is presented isn't exactly ideal. The cutscenes are few and far between, and range from being purely perfunctory to overly surreal, poorly paced, and poorly placed. Data logs are everywhere, and maybe I just don't remember things anymore, but it seems like there's way more of them in this game than there was in BioShock, with a lot of them being significantly less interesting than the data logs in that game. Atomic Hearts makes a big show of the player character being able to communicate with the dead, due to the neural patterns of some corpses being temporarily stored in their collective doohickeys in their head. And initially, that seems like a cool idea, to talk to a person about how they feel about having died. But most of the time, these conversations either lead to jokes, which are sometimes funny, or getting a code required to unlock a door, which means you have to talk to all of them. Atomic Heart, in a nutshell, feels like a game of unrealized potential, from the combat, to the level design, to the NPCs, to the ideas that underpin it. It's a good game, but not a great one, and I'd recommend playing it if it goes on sale or if you're a die-hard BioShock fan. However, it's important to stress that these are mistakes of incompetence, not malice or political subversion. And a lot of the more technical problems, like glitches, or obvious missing features like field of view settings, have been fixed with subsequent updates. This is Mundfish's first game. They clearly don't know what they're doing yet, but they also clearly love BioShock and other games like it. Despite the flaws of Atomic Heart, Mundfish is a developer to keep your eye on for the future. If you want to hear more about the quality of the game itself, I was a guest on EFAP discussing it for like 6 hours, so head over to Mahler's channel and check that out. But now, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. There is always an elephant in the room in my videos. On February 6, 2023, YouTuber Harenko released a video titled, "Please Don't Buy Atomic Heart." He's a small YouTuber, but this video went viral, currently sitting at 2 million views. And not in a good way. A lot of people have autistically broken this video's arguments down, spending hours on it sometimes, and I'm not gonna do that. But I will go over it briefly and the controversy it spawned. Harenko points out that Mundfish is a Russian developer, and immediately criticizes their response in the Ukraine war.
Now that we've established that this is actually a Russian studio, what is their opinion on the war going on? What could be their stance on this tragic matter that could save and keep their public image and also not tank the sales? Let's read out loud together. Guys, we have noted the questions surrounding where we at Montfish stand. We want to assure you that Montfish is a developer and studio with a global team focused on an innovative game and is undeniably a pro-peace organization against violence against people. We do not comment on politics or religion. Rest assured, we're a global team focused... Hold on, stop. We do not comment on politics? You're making a game that's sole idea is USSR renewal and communism. You classified your game as inspired by Bioshock and Prey, yet you go the no politics in my video game route? This is one step away from the types of gamers who say, I don't like politics in my video game, and then immediately open up Fallout.
There's a difference between a video game having a political theme, where the story may be political but doesn't only cut one way, and a video game where an ideologue writer beats you over the head with their soapbox. And it's also entirely legit for people who make political art to also not comment on ongoing real-world political issues, especially if they're living in Russia, and Putin could make them disappear if they decided to mouth off on Twitter. Harenko literally wants these people to virtue signal themselves to death. Harenko points out that several people working at Montfish have connections with other Russian companies, that those other companies have taken grants and subsidies from the Russian state, that revenue earned by Atomic Heart will indirectly support the Russian state, and therefore also support Russia's actions in Ukraine.
GEM Capital is a Russian fund founded by Anatoly Pali, who previously worked at Gazprom's subsidiary, Gazenergoset. The studio raised investments from them in 2021, where Anatoly met and became friends with oligarchs who got rich on oil and gas activities and now have the opportunity to invest large sums of money in various projects. Namely, the export of gas and oil is one of the main categories of income of the Russian budget, the money from which goes to the military industry. And if you know basic economics and finances, you know that all investments must be returned, including interest. Moreover, a Twitter user found Pali's connection to other Russian state institutions, such as the sanctioned, systematically important bank VTB. The game attracted as many as 4 publishers: Xbox, 4Divinity, Focus Entertainment, and VK Play. Let's focus on VK Play. It is known to be a gaming division of the former Mail.ru, the same Mail.ru who had Maxim Zatsepin as their former top manager. And again, it is closely connected with the Russian government and participates in many initiatives of the Kremlin. If Atomic Heart is being developed with money that originated from sanctioned Russian businesses such as VK and Mail.ru, and banks which are systematically important to Russian government such as VTB, profits from the game could be directed to help the Russian government in its invasion. Thus, by buying Atomic Heart, you would pay money to companies that support the aggressive policies and military actions of the Russian Federation.
And yes, I'm sure at least a couple of Western dollars used to buy copies of Atomic Heart will filter down through to Montfish, which will then be taxed to the Russian state, which will then go towards supporting the Russian war effort. If that means you don't want to buy Atomic Heart, then sure, go ahead. There's very strong moral arguments to be made that the West should have stopped trading with Nazi Germany, at least earlier than it did, and that we should stop trading with China now. But another YouTuber, Brink of Art, did the math on this. If Atomic Heart made the same amount of money as Elden Ring, and it didn't, and if 100% of that money went to the Russian state, and it's not, that would constitute about 4% of Russia's yearly military budget. The impact this one game is having on the war in Ukraine is quite small, all things considered. If you still don't want to buy it for this reason, that's fine. But Harenko presents it as this great moral failing if you just want to ignore real-world politics and play your game. Harenko makes the argument that the Soviet theming of the game is tantamount to Russian propaganda.
The game is filled to the brim with USSR-themed keepsakes and memorabilia, from drinking condensed milk straight out of the can to actual flags and symbols of the USSR hammer and sickle. This kind of approach to the showcase of USSR and communism walks a thin line between using it for world building and praising it, and there are many solid reasons to believe that this line has been crossed completely right into promoting and idealizing the USSR regime and using it as a tool of USSR and Russian military propaganda.
This logic doesn't make any sense. Atomic Heart is clearly not a game glorifying the Soviet Union. It's a game that critiques it, as well as socialism, communism, and collectivism more generally. You have to be intellectually dishonest to make the claim that this is Russian military propaganda. The Ukrainian government has decided to make this exact claim too, which is just stupid. Okay, it does make sense for Ukraine itself to ban the sale of Russian stuff. That's obvious. But for the Ukrainian government to say that it romanticizes communist ideology, these guys haven't played it either. And finally, Harenko makes the argument that the game is sexist because it prominently features the sexy robot lesbian twins.
They went with another plan to make typical capital G gamers buy their game, which is of course none other than through sexualization and objectification of women. So far I have avoided showing these characters on screen, but I am talking about the couple of female USSR-styled robots that they suddenly added in recent trailers and thumbnails to get the attention of the lusty neckbeards. Just by searching Atomic Heart on YouTube and scrolling far down, it's impossible to miss the countless trailers, thumbnails, edits, and shorts about these characters, with some videos claiming that they'll buy the game just for these two, which also brings in the ongoing issue of sexualizing lesbians in media.
His entire segment on this part is just soying out about sexism in video games. You've all watched Anita Sarkeesian from like a decade ago. You know where this argument goes. Hey, I forgot to do that retrospective that I had planned for a month ago. Shit. The only thing that I agree with Harenko on is how Atomic Heart was sold at a AAA pricing tier, even though it's clearly not a AAA game. Fair enough, though of course, it's not like AAA games are any better nowadays either. So, Harenko's video did not receive the reception he likely expected, at least among gamers, but leftoids were happy to agree with him. This game is glorifying sexual assault and has Ukraine-looking robot sex slaves. We all told you this would happen, but you wanted to fund a game that pays their government and military to traffic, rape, torture, and kill our women. They straight up based the sex slave robot design off of a Ukrainian politician. This hairstyle in question is a crown braid, and is common not only in Ukraine, but across Eastern Europe, including Russia. This is not a case of specifically sexualizing Ukrainians. Also, the Ukrainian politician that this idiot appealed to, she's actually pro-Russian. This thread here went viral, mainly due to Hassan retweeting it, and it has some really good points, though it also definitely goes off the rails. Hey guys, anybody want to take a guess as to why Atomic Heart is such a fucking breath of fresh air in the absolute pile of pig diarrhea that is modern AAA single-player games? Any guesses? The attached picture here is a bunch of nerdy-looking but otherwise normal guys, and one hot girl who's a higher-up at Munfish. The implication here is there's no diversity hires, there's no leftist politics, no hyper-coddled beautiful ones that provide no value to the company, just people who wanted to make the game. This character would have not left the cutting room floor at Blue Hair Fat Bitch Incorporated. Absolutely true. This is the vending machine with a hypersexualized female AI that constantly asks you to dominate it every time you see it. It was cringe as fuck, but also really funny, and honestly, it reminded me of the edgy days of the 2000s in a good way. Wokoids would never do this. POV, you are about to do $70 million in damage to a software company with a picture of weird hair dye. Okay, I get it. POV, you are behind on your work, and the ex-model founder of the company walks in and asks you to work hard, and all you can think about is the fact that at any moment she might just snap and drag you into her office and suck your balls out through your dick hole. Jesus Christ, dude, are you okay? Oh wow, Kerbal Space Program 2 came out. Let's see. Uh-oh, how could this have happened? The game was a flop, and the picture of the development team shows way less nerds and way more hipsters, queer girls, and pride flags. Let's see his explanation of this disparity. Lots of people are angry at this post. I will remind them that games have fallen off big time since people started going to school for game design, and American companies started getting big enough to hire shitty corporate sludge to clog up the creativity process. The best, most interesting games of the past decade are all from indie devs, dudes who made mods and decided to make a game. Atomic Heart is the first title from the studio. It took them 5 years. Extreme risk and reward. You can see the seriousness of the Atomic Heart devs in that they are not fat, balding, manlet goon beards. Nobody has dyed hair because anybody that does is mentally ill. And the lack of women inspires a work environment free of stress. If you're a game dev and have been in the industry long enough, you know this is true. You will never ever dare to say it, because not only would you be fired, but also blacklisted. The good news is you can't ban indie games, and tools are getting easier and easier for people to use. The bad news is if you're hoping that the new Ubisoft game will be fun, it won't be. Ever. If you are running any business, know the signs. This is the easiest one to spot. It's completely legal to discriminate against people who show up to work looking like this. The included picture here is, well, it's cancer. If a woman takes her hair length above the ear line or shaves any part of it to her skin, she's a business liability because you are dealing with a woman who is deliberately casting off or mutilating her most obvious feminine features. Direct sign of deep distress and mental illness. Same thing with atypical hair dye. This goes for both sexes. There are several things a person can do to change their hair appearance to fit their personality that isn't coloring it bright. Bright hair dye has never once in the history of humanity improved the look of a person. It only works in anime, which is not real. It's a direct sign you're looking at a person who is not remotely serious about themselves, and by proxy, won't be serious about their work. Game studios are packed with people like this, and the unseriousness rubs off in the product. They can't leave their personal lives at home and instead bring it to work and agitate for whatever things they think is important at home into the game. But worse, it's infectious. The game dev community is completely infested with activists, cripples, and homosexuals and transsexuals. Veteran bro-dude game developers who used to push out quality products like Randy Pitchford. Randy Pitchford? Jesus. You might not like it, you might vehemently disagree, but the reality is, the best games of all time are usually developed by teams of white males who are secluded from women and political agitators. And then in response to an EA developer disagreeing with him, he simply says, everyone knows they haven't shipped a good game in decades. Okay, so this guy does have a very good point about the HRification of modern AAA game development. I will probably have to do a video at some point on the concept of HRification, because it is pretty important. He brings up Ubisoft, EA, Rare, and Blizzard as companies that have all been HRified and now produce only garbage, though I will argue that EA was never good. But as much as I love a good schizo thread, he does overstate his case in one critical way. You will have indie studios that make amazing games, then expand, and then get AIDS and start producing trash. This cycle will continue until affirmative action is gone and a studio decides it's just going to be white dudes making games, and the quality differential becomes obvious. Yep, I know that the old-style SJWs, back during Gamergate, railed against white dudes making games. But to be honest, that doesn't mean that you should go completely the inverse and only want white dudes making games. Some of the best games out there are Japanese. Those guys aren't white, and Japan also has no shortage of women working in game development. The issue isn't race and it isn't sex, it's ideological capture. People who contribute very little to the actual development of the game or running of the company, only there to suck up resources and look good on the company's ESG score. People who will file false harassment charges against their coworkers because one of the programming monkeys is a loner who doesn't go out after work to drink with everyone else, and he dated an Asian girl in college, so he's clearly a racist and a sexist. People who insert their shitty politics into the workplace because they now feel an obligation to use what little scrap of power they have to advance a revolutionary cause. Yes, the Gramsci video is coming soon. It is ultimately about ideology. There was a viral TikTok recently about a woman who did hiring at her company, and she explains it very well.
So if I was like hiring and I saw pronouns, here's what I'm going to assume. I'm going to assume you're obviously very liberal. So I'm going to assume you're one of those people that is super far left. I'm going to assume you're not a very hard worker. You are either a female or you're a probably not straight guy. So everything in the office is going to have to cater to you, your feelings, your needs, and your emotions. So everyone around you is not going to be able to be themselves and walk on eggshells. Why would anyone want someone like you unless everyone's like you in a work environment? You're going to be the laziest person. You're going to be the most entitled, complain the most, and I think you're going to be the first to sue. So shocker that pronouns weren't helping you guys. Sorry, is there anything I missed there? Is there anything I missed?
You can have white dudes who are absolute communist shitters. You can have based black women. There is a correlation between various demographics and political views, that's for sure, but the important part is not the demographics, it's the politics. It just really sucks that these people ruin dyed hair and piercings. Those chicks used to be edgy and cool. Now when you see that shit, it's a sign that you're about to be woke scolded for watching anime in your private life. You can tell that despite the schizo ramble, Anon really hit a nerve here, because Hassan replied, whining, "If you're this Gamergate in 2023, you're better off with a lobotomy." I love how Gamergate is still around in the minds of these freaks 10 years on, and how nowadays it just refers to opposition to workplace policies that deny their politics as a self-defense mechanism because they're inherently toxic. Yeah, the dude who posted this thread is really fucking weird sometimes, but you know what? I'm still never gonna hire a blue-haired commie for my business. Atomic Heart came out just a bit after Hogwarts Legacy, and it ultimately received the same type of bump that game did, though nowhere near as big. Leftoids freaked the fuck out about the game's existence, which raised awareness of the game among people who are unaligned, uninvolved, and don't live on Twitter. This led to increased sales, recognition, and the general understanding that politics generally doesn't sell, making a quality product does. The game itself is just mid, which is better than most fucking games coming out nowadays, so I guess it's worth playing. But the more important part of the story is just how many W's gamers are getting recently. The normies are slowly, but finally, waking up to why pop culture has been so shit for so long, and the tide is finally turning. The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice.